this right here is not a real number because you can't take the square root of a negative number unless you use i's. And if you remember that I is equal to the square root of -1. And so if you square that, I squared is equal to -1. And so those are the two things that we're going to use when we're working with the imaginary numbers here. So first off, square root of -12. Remember, I can split up the stuff under the square root if it helps me to simplify. And the reason I've split this up like this is I can replace root 4 with a 2, and I can replace a square root of -1 with an I. So this is 2I root 3. When you're dealing with i's, you deal with them the same way as you would an x, except for this fact right here. Whenever you get an I squared, you can replace it with -1. So the first step is just to distribute like normal, except this I squared is now -1. So I have 12I minus 18. I've replaced the I squared with a -1 and multiplied it to the positive 18. You can't have an I in the denominator the same way you can't have a square root in the denominator, so the technique is going to be similar to this problem up here, where we multiply by the conjugate. 4 plus 5I. And if we do it on the bottom, we have to do it on the top. Again, because I'm really just multiplying by a funny form of 1. So I'm not changing the value of this expression at all. So now I just distribute. I've got 12 plus 15I on the top. And then on the bottom, I've got 16. I'm going to kind of skip this part because it's going to cancel out. Plus 20I minus 20I adds up to be 0. And then I've got minus 25I squared. You have to be careful of this here because I've got a minus from my expression, but now this I squared is going to turn into a -1. So on the bottom here, I'll actually have 16 plus 25. A lot of people know that, but they mess it up because they don't write out their steps. I'm all for conserving paper and pencil lead if it helps you, but in this case, I think a lot of students would get this right if they just wrote this out. Okay, there we go. Solving equations with radicals in them, you just want to undo this, okay? Undo square rooting. To undo square rooting, you do the opposite. You square it. The squaring undoes the square root, so now you've got 5x minus 6 equals 4. And then just solve for x. So x is equal to 2.